Have you ever found yourself watching a YouTube political commentary channel, heard them cite something, and then checked the source yourself and found that it said something completely different? It happens all the time in the videos I respond to, and I often wonder what goes through the mind of someone as they read this stuff. Do they have an agenda they're trying to push by distorting the truth? Or are they just not bright enough to understand what they're reading? And that brings us to Tim Pool. Pool styles himself a journalist, and while I'm not terribly familiar with the thousands of videos he's released, I'm going to violate his recommendation and focus on one video where he gives us a lovely example of how to read an article and twist it into a narrative. The title to his video, "Vox Thinks Men Don't Deserve Civil Rights?" reminds me of an old adage when it comes to journalism. If a headline ends with a question mark, the answer is usually no. Pool is responding to an article from Vox titled "A Men's Rights Activist Sued a Women's Beer Event," written by Rebecca James. Now let's see why this video got 122,000 views at the time of me writing this.
I don't even know how to describe this, okay? This has got to be the most ignorant piece of writing I have ever seen. It's actually rather terrifying and bigoted.
So we're off to a great start. Pool is letting us know that this article in Vox is the most ignorant piece of writing he's ever seen. This is actually a good opener, not because it's true, of course, but because it's still specific to the article itself and doesn't pretend that this article is some kind of Rosetta Stone for the left. Well, at least it doesn't do that yet. The first couple of minutes is just Pool blandly reading the article, which hardly matters because it's the commentary where the distortion happens. Let's look at how he interprets one slightly ambiguous line.
Men's rights activists believe that society is actually sexist against men. Full stop. Not necessarily. It's my understanding that by putting actually sexist against men, they're kind of implying that they don't believe it's sexist against women.
Wait, how does he know that? This line, men's rights activists believe that society is actually sexist against men. Anything regarding women here is being completely inferred by Pool. His phrasing,
they're kind of implying,
gives him permission to launch into a rant about a straw man of his own making. Pool's perceived idea that Jennings, the author of the article, believes men's rights activists don't believe society is sexist towards women. Maybe she does think that, but there's nothing in the article so far to suggest that, except for Pool's bias.
Society is actually only sexist against men.
The word only doesn't appear there. This is a single line in an article, and some more context can help us shed some light on what the author is trying to say. Context like this.
Fry has perfected the subculture's favorite way to target what they see as a society that's sexist against men, suing businesses and organizations that incentivize women to go there.
Jennings is telling us that men's rights activists, Martin Fry specifically, see society as sexist against men. Once again, no mention of women. This is why reading an article line by line is often a recipe for disaster. Taking time to understand context matters. But if you're trying to push a narrative, you might be more inclined to imagine what the author thinks, rather than engaging with what they're actually saying.
If you are running a public business, and you are using public infrastructure, I am of the opinion you must serve members of the public within reason. There's nuance, right? There's certain grounds in which you can remove certain people. I don't think it's absolute, but for the most part, if someone wants to come to your event, you can't be like, no dudes allowed, because that would be a violation of civil rights law. I think so.
Right. Okay, let's go back to the article and have Tim read it out for us.
But in November 2017, as Sue tells Eater, a man emailed Eagle Rock's general information line asking for a spot at the ticketed forum. A staff member mistakenly told the man that the event was for women only. In fact, men have attended before. And even after he was offered access to a future women's beer event, the man ultimately filed a discrimination claim through the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the entity in charge of enforcing California's civil rights laws.
What did he say again?
You can't be like, no dudes allowed.
So if someone on staff at this bar mistakenly tells someone that men aren't allowed, when men have attended this event several times in the past, and the person was offered a spot in the future, this is grounds for a civil rights lawsuit. Really? This turns into a little rant.
But I would be surprised if Vox isn't supporting the gay couple that wanted the wedding cake. Basically, the wedding cake story is a gay couple wanted a custom wedding cake. The proprietor said, you can buy any one of these cakes, but I won't do a custom job for your wedding. And so they sued, and the left is upset about it, and the right is defending the private business rights. Well, what about this?
This is a mushy-mouthed gotcha game, trying to catch Vox on some kind of hypocrisy charge. I could play the same game Pool is playing. I could make a whole video asking why the right is so anxious to defend a cake shop refusing to bake a cake for a gay couple, but is silent on a bar supposedly refusing service to men at a special event for women. Although I'd still be a liar making that video, because the women's night doesn't ban men from attending, something Tim Pool never figures out.
Because it's not actually about civil rights, it's not about principle. It's about just winning, right? So the left is on the side of certain groups. All they want is for them to win. They don't care about the principle.
Holy shit. One article on Vox is suddenly standing in for the left. Does Jennings realize how important she is now? She is the voice of the left. But obviously, Pool here is using his reading of this specific article for commentary about the left. This is his exemplar, and this is the point we've safely left the realm of criticizing a specific article, and we're now talking about a group of people. So a quick sketch of what we've seen so far. Pool is reading this article with a bit of creative license, using it to inform a certain branch of commentary, and now he's taking that commentary and placing it all on the shoulders of the left. I hope the game being played here is becoming more obvious. Here's some more bad reading.
And as she told Eater, she wants to elicit some form of change at the legislative level to minimize the exploitation of the UNRRA Act, a California law against discrimination by sex, race, and other factors, by career plaintiffs so that the small businesses and women's groups don't continually get targeted for these cases. Career plaintiffs. Man, I love the absolute bias here. Let's call the man an activist. They've called him a men's rights activist. Why call him a career plaintiff? He's clearly doing this to make a point, and he's using the law as it is written. It is not an exploitation of the law to make sure businesses are upholding the law, right? That's your issue.
So did anyone catch the mistake Pool made here? This video, I thought, was about the bias in Vox's article as it was written by Jennings, with Vox, and by extension Jennings, being responsible for the extreme bias. But what he just read here isn't written by Jennings. It's a quote from Ting Su, the woman who ran the Women's Beer Forum. Generally speaking, you shouldn't assume that someone reporting on a story agrees with everything, or even most, of what a subject is saying. Pool even acknowledges Fry is called an activist earlier in the article, which should have given him a hint as to what was going on here. A bigger hint than the fucking quotation marks. I want to take the bait for a moment. Where does Sue get off calling Fry a career plaintiff? This article from KCAL Los Angeles from 2014 describes Fry in another lawsuit where he was doing some real activism, suing Cha Cha's Latin Kitchen restaurant in Brea in July 2013, claiming he was denied the opportunity to order the same ladies' night special discount items that were offered to female patrons during visits to the restaurant in January and May 2013. What a hero. He lost this suit, but according to court records, Fry has filed over 40 sex discrimination lawsuits, and this was back in 2014, and we know that number has gone up by at least one, as per the article we're talking about right now. This is the clear behavior of someone looking for these lawsuits, using the law to pressure businesses to get rid of promotions that he considers violations of his rights. And I stress that these are what he considers violations of his rights, as he's lost a number of these lawsuits that have gone to trial. Though generally a lot of them settle outside of court because the businesses he targets can't afford to fight back. That's the grift the Jennings article is trying to describe. If this went to court, the law could be tested, and as we've seen in the past, Fry has lost several of his claims. Why Tim Pool thinks he is a credible activist, I'm not too sure. I guess he probably just hasn't read up on the subject outside of a Vox article he can yell at and paint as extreme leftist propaganda. It's easy to call something propaganda or extreme leftist, bigoted, whatever, when you don't read beyond that article or even read the article accurately. As a side note, I'd like to mention that all these lawsuits filed by Fry really highlight the absurdity of the legal system, where important questions of rights can only be settled by those who can afford lawyers. We're getting to some good stuff now.
The weaponization of the law against the very philosophy that one claims to champion is a case study in irony. For MRAs, it's able-bodied white cis heterosexual men using civil rights legislation which is enacted to walk back the country's history of viewing the rights of able-bodied cis white heterosexual men as more important than others. No, it's not! That's literally not why we have civil rights laws. Civil rights law isn't written to say white men have too much power. Civil rights law is written to say that any person is deserving of rights.
Ooh, he gets so angry here. I like this little clip. Not because it's funny seeing him get angry, but because it encapsulates an incredibly dopey reading of history and some painful pedantry. The why we have civil rights laws is what I want to focus on here. Civil rights laws were not written to be anti-white man, obviously, right? But the context in which they were written was specifically designed to protect the rights of individuals who are not able-bodied white cis heterosexual men, because those were the people who had the most rights in American society before they were written. As a point of comparison, let's take a famous example, the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It reads pretty simply as, "The rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." That sounds like it was written to protect all sexes, right? But why was it written in the first place? I would hope people would know that it was written because women were being denied the right to vote. To say that this amendment was written to protect men and women is true only in the most pedantic sense. The historical reality of that amendment is that it was written to protect the rights of women. Let's look at the quoted section again from the Jennings article. Civil rights legislation, which is enacted to walk back the country's history of viewing the rights of able-bodied, white, cis, heterosexual men as more important than others. Maybe the is should have been a was here, if we're going to be particular about grammar, since enacted is the past tense. But the walk back the country's history part is pretty explicit in that this sentence is about why these laws were created, to correct the racist and sexist differences in American society present in its founding. If you don't believe the US was racist and sexist when it started, then I don't know, man. Women not being able to vote in slavery seem pretty sexist and racist to me. And the irony this paragraph by Jennings is pointing out is that Fry is using civil rights legislation to shut down a space where women have historically been underrepresented. To focus on a pedantic reading of the law is to completely miss the point of what Jennings is writing here. It says as much in the one paragraph that Poole didn't even touch in his reading. When the law is set up to protect all people regardless of their demographic, these kinds of bad faith actors are able to twist laws designed to help correct imbalances to try to undermine their existence. That is to say, when people abuse the law in this way, bad faith actors like Martin Fry, it undermines the reason these laws were created in the first place. Someone like Fry isn't really striving for equality so much as he is trying to make sure that white men don't lose a single ounce of their privilege, and that includes, apparently, having access to discounts. Poole's reading here is divorced from history in that he sees these laws in a modern context as a neutral tool for anyone who meets their definition. While it's well and good to write laws like these neutrally, I suspect when civil rights laws were written to get people to take whites-only signs down, they weren't worried about a day when men would be denied a 25% discount on a green fee. And yeah, that's one of the fights Martin Fry fought for. He was very upset there was a 25% discount for women during Breast Cancer Awareness Month at a golf course. Like I said, the guy's a hero.
And invert it. It would be perfect in the 1950s. Women are suing men under civil rights law. They're exploiting the law to gain access. That's literally not what civil rights are about.
Another lovely take. Are men really as disadvantaged today as women were in the 1950s? Really? There's a level of nuance here he just isn't engaging with because it isn't really convenient to his narrative that he's pushing.
Like, take a philosophy course, just read some philosophy and some famous writers on liberty and freedom and what it really means, because this is some of the most insane, bigoted, racist nonsense I've ever seen. Oh my god.
Man, this guy must not see much if this is the most bigoted stuff he's ever seen. Also, how is this racist? Wasn't this about sexism? Does Tim Pool think this video is about race just because she's Asian? Obviously, I'm just being silly here. He clearly misspoke. I fully recognize that it's a dick move to ignore the context of a person's words to create a straw man to further a political narrative. If only we were both playing by those rules. Before leaving the video entirely, here are the most telling clips.
And again, that's about all I really know because I don't follow this a whole lot, but I will say, when I don't follow Vox. I read Vox pretty often, but I don't know their exact opinion on the wedding cake thing. Personally, I don't know the full details of Jordan Peterson's suits.
In each of those clips, Tim Pool is admitting he doesn't know many details of what he's commenting on, and then proceeds to comment on it. Funnily enough, he knows less than he realizes, from why civil rights laws exist to the nature of the event this article is describing. But he doesn't stop himself from commenting on any of it. And this is what annoys me. Unlike Pool, I won't make any broader claims about my subject based on one video. I sampled a few more of his videos, but not nearly enough to form an opinion on the guy because the few I actually sat down and watched made me stand up from my computer and consider the terrible choices I've made. Tim Pool's video has an argument that Vox, a stand-in for the left, constantly pushes out sexist pieces on their website. Pool's strategy to prove this hypothesis is to focus on a single video, contorting it to fit his premise, and then providing it as evidence for his narrative. Maybe if I comb through his thousands of videos, maybe I could find some actual evidence of this narrative existing, and his point could have some merit. But even if he does have videos where he provides evidence that Vox is some kind of horribly sexist outlet, this isn't one of them. This is just Tim Pool feeding his audience a narrative.